This toolkit is all about ratios. The vocabulary for your lesson. The first one is ratio. So what is a ratio? A ratio is a comparison of two values. So like if I were to compare boys and girls in our community, I would say there are 20 boys and 26 girls. That is comparison of two values. The second one is equivalent ratio. Equivalent ratio is just like an equivalent fraction. They're two equal ratios. So two ratios that have the same value. And as an example, I wrote down 1/5 and 4/20. These two are equal to one another, so they're equivalent ratios. The last one is simplest form. And this is, again, something that we used in fractions, and this is when a fraction can no longer be reduced. So both 5 and 6 are prime, and so they can't be reduced any further, and so that's the simplest form. Very important concept number 1 is writing ratios. There are 3 different ways to write ratios. So let's use the example. There are 25 8th grade and 21 7th grade students in Community 4. The first way you can write it is 25 over 21. So we take the amount of 8th graders and we put it over the amount of 7th graders. The second way to write it is using a colon. So you're using these 2 little dots in the middle to say that these two are connected together. The one that is mentioned first is always the first number with the colon. The last way is just using the word to. So if I were to compare 8th graders to 7th graders, there would be 25 to 21 students in our community. Now with ratios, sometimes you do part to part, meaning you take the part of a number, or the part of a group and the part of a group and you compare them, and sometimes you do part to whole. So you can also compare values differently. So in part to part, there's part of our community is 8th graders, part of our community is 7th graders, so we've got 25 to 21. That's the same thing that you saw up here. There's another way to compare them. You could compare part to whole. So like just the 7th graders as compared to our whole community. So 7th graders is 21 to 46 in our whole community. So this would be a part to whole ratio. Very important concept number 2 is simplifying ratios. So these are the steps for simplifying a ratio. 1, write your ratio as a fraction. It may already be written as a fraction, but if it's not, this is when you need to do that. So if I took 21 to 45, I would rewrite that as 21 over 45. So this is the part and this is the whole right there. Second thing is to find the greatest common factor, or the GCF. When I do my greatest common factor, I list out all the factors, and then I find the largest factor that they're sharing, and I see that it's a 3. Then the third step is to simplify that. So I divide both of them by 3, the greatest common factor. 21 divided by 3 is 7, and 45 divided by 3 is 15. So 7/15 is the reduced, or the simplified ratio. Very important concept number 3 is comparing ratios. So there are going to be times when someone asks, is this ratio bigger than that ratio? You want to be able to see if they're the same or if they're different. So what you do is the first step, you write your ratio in simplest form. So we just did that. You reduce it down to the basic number. So in our example, we've got 6/8 and 36/48. So I rewrite it as a fraction. I find the greatest common factor between 6 and 8, and that's 2. And then I reduce it, so it's 3/4. And then I do the same thing with 36 and 48. Rewrite it as a fraction, find the greatest common factor, and it happens to be 12. I simplify it by 12, so 36 divided by 12 is 3, and 48 divided by 12 is 4. And then I see that then the last step is to compare the two values. So 3/4 and 3/4 are the same. So 6/8 and 36/48 are the same value, even though they look really different. So here are your practice problems. First one is to write the ratio 8 feet out of 15 15 feet in 3 different ways. In BIC number 1, we talked about the 3 ways that you could write it. Number 2, write 2 different ratios that are equivalent to 3 2s. So we simplified earlier, you can do the same thing by multiplying to make it bigger. Find 2 more equivalent ratios. Number 3, write each ratio in simplest form. So I've given you 3 different ratios, and I want you to simplify them using the greatest common factor.